I am working on missing data today. We're looking at how to identify missing data for various types of missingness that occur in this administrative data I have. So I have this administrative data where police departments report crime on a monthly basis, and sometimes they don't report every month because they don't have a crime every month, or they just forget, or various reasons, which is part of what the challenge is here. But the FBI and the people who maintain the data, they include some indicators in the data to tell us whether or not the data is missing, and if it is missing, maybe if it was included in a different report. So I'm going to explore those indicators, see how valid they are. Do they say there's missing data when there's actually data there, etc., and try to figure out some rules for using those indicators to make the data set a little more complete, a little better to work with. So that's really the challenge for today. I'm switching it up, not using the notebook format today. I'm going to go ahead and use the normal RStudio window here. I'm going to make my font size a little bit bigger to make it easier on everyone. And hopefully that'll work. So I like to usually have RStudio organized like this, with the source file on the left and the right is the console. So I've actually just been working a little bit before this. I pulled in a sample of my total data, and I've been looking at these two variables, month included in and number of months reported. And I'm looking to first of all see whether there's actually missing data in those variables themselves. So is there missingness in the missing? And there isn't in number of months reported, but there is in this variable month included in. And that variable should tell us whether or not the data for a given month is reported in a different month or not. My hunch here is that the missing data is when they didn't bother to report at all for that month, so they also didn't bother to say whether their data was included in a different month. But we're going to investigate that now. So I've got my dplyr pipe here, and I've filtered down the data to look at just a sample of 10 fields where month included in is missing. And I can see that some of them say that they didn't report at all, but some of them said, oh, actually we did previously report this. ORI reported in September of 2010 that they actually had previously reported in June. And this other one reported that in 2000 in June that they had previously reported in January. So I know that I can't immediately rule out that they just didn't report at all that year. So now I need to figure out some other things. So I see whether there's any that have a missing value that actually reported some crimes. So we can see that that's not true, that if this variable is missing, then there is no crime reported by the entity. That's good. That tells me something. Then I can also see, well, when this variable is missing, did they report the number of months that they reported at the same time? And you can see that sometimes they actually do. The most common thing is that they hadn't reported at all for the whole year. So that's nice. We know that most often this is an indicator that they didn't report for the whole year, but we need to come up with a rule for what to do with these cases here. So we're going to look at those cases now. And I'm getting pretty handy at inserting chunks on the fly, which is turning out to be pretty useful. So to do that, I'm going to filter where there's a missing value in this variable, and filter where I could put those in the same, but let's just split them into two filter calls where number reported, how that looks. And we'll just pick one of these to look at for now. That's a value that's valid. And I'm gonna select then I'm gonna select that. Let's just look at 10 or so fields. Alright. So that wasn't that enlightening. Probably what I'd rather do is make this a little result set and do a couple statistics on it. So let's do that. A temp, favorite temporary variable name, and let's just do. Okay, so we already knew that that would be the case from above. Now let's see. So we're getting December, which is when they would say that November was their last reported. They're reporting no data in December, and they're all reporting that they previously reported in November, and they're missing not included in. So let's see if there's, maybe it's a bad year for everyone. But no, we see that these are spread out across the years. See if they're a certain kind of entity. See if they're small. Not really. Is there any other field that I could pull in? Maybe. Stream is in study today. Wonder if anyone's in the chat. If you are, make sure to say hi. I will be able to answer your questions then. I've got some questions here actually for myself. I'm gonna get myself another glass of tea here. My main question is, what I probably want to do is look at the whole year for these ORI codes. So that's probably, I want to see what their data looks like. So one way to do that would be to say, let's just pick. I'm gonna just pick one. Say let's pick Iowa. Let's pick this actually, this slightly bigger one in Mississippi. 04. And here is 1998. Oh, Michigan. Learn that. Well, it looks like maybe they didn't report December. Could also be a problem with the codebook application of this variable here. one thing is that I misread in the codebook. I'm going to need to make a note to myself when I parse the codebook. This shouldn't be missing. It should say only. This means it's only in February, only in whatever. So we can just hop over here. Change this to only. Can rebuild the database. Code that later. So so basically each month we have some percentage of entities saying I'm not going to fill out the month included in form, and some do. So what I really want to figure out is which ones do that and why. So no month reported. That one makes sense. So let's look where it's not no month reported. So we can just say where no months reported, it seems to be that there's just no data. And note of that here. But now let's check out the next one. Let's see. Now let's look at the other case. So create a new result set by the same filter. It's not. Also here we see that these have no data. They are also not empty. So they are places that have data sometimes. So now let's see if we can add an indicator of the annual amount of data. And from the annual amount of data, we can see if they just didn't report anything for the whole year or what's going on there. So that's pretty easy to do. We'll just yeah. We'll go by our code and year, and we will mutate. We played with mutating on the last stream, so if you didn't see that, you can check that out. It's pretty helpful for us. Go. And we'll just call this annual count and equal the sum of this. What we should see now, we have a new variable, and if we just pick, remember we looked at that one ORI code, I looked at all of their data. Where are they? And no, here they are. And we see that this is the sum of this column. It's consistent here to here. So that's good news. What we can do now is go back up here and redraw temp. And that's what I thought. So it's when that field is missing and we have something other than no months reported, that month has no data, but the other months do have data sometimes at least. Oftentimes because the annual amount is higher. So that's a good indicator. Let's just satisfy my curiosity and actually this. Oh, actually, we can't do that. Still not quite fluent in pipes. It's been a while. It's been a while. I was just thinking this morning, I haven't really coded R for about 4 months, so I'm a little rusty. Bet about it. Oh, let's just do this. Probably this is easier. Oh, you know what though? You gotta remember to ungroup. Perfect. Okay, so that confirms what we already know. That when no month's reported, we know that there's no data there. So there is data there in the year. when it doesn't say no months reported in this other flag field. So, and now I need to figure out how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to assign this a 0? Or am I going to think about whether or not the data from this month, it went somewhere else? Yesterday we played around with where we learned when an agency had reported only twice a year or once a year in December or in December and June or in June, and we interpolated the data using a simple linear model. Probably won't need to do that here, but I want to check out whether we need to consider extending that to be able to handle these kinds of situations. So I'm going to start looking at a few ORI codes, and I'm going to look at their data, and I'm going to look at their data kind of, well, I'm going to look at their data for various things. Whether they kind of seem to have consistent patterns in how this month is reported. We know that this month's going to have 0, but we're going to see if they have, we have some of these that have a lot of data that they reported for the year, at least one of them, and we want to see how did they manage to miss. Did they miss more than one month? Because we don't know how often that happens too. We could actually calculate that really quick. How often? Let's use the mutate call and just make a quick count. Basically, I want to make an indicator for when this is the situation. Month included in is missing, and number of months reported does not equal that. That indicator, then I can use that. I can see how often that occurs per entity, and I can also do some calculations on entities that have that pattern. So I'm gonna mutate my data. I'm gonna group it by ORI coded year. And I'm going to summarize, or I'm going to mutate, and I'm going to create a variable called, and it's going to be equal to well, that's not quite. I guess I could say included in interesting. I think this is right. Let's check. Yeah, my select statement. Now you could put index of columns in there. Guess not. Can. But gotta do the filter first then. Gotta think about pipe order of operations there. That wasn't that smart. This one on February, January, March. this one on April, August. Good, they didn't. December. This may be tricky to identify. Not sure what to think about how to do this exactly. I think probably what I'll do is take it at its word that it is not reported. But I don't know whether that means, for example, here, we got crime pretty much every month. Except the month that they didn't report, December and August. It's busy. Seems safe to assume that there would be about 30 to 40 crimes in there. And then that means their annual count is deflated. So we might want to count these as actually, yeah. Entities that didn't report. So I need to fill them in. So yeah, I think it's fair to write that in as a missing. What about the case where it's missing for the whole year? In fact, that doesn't occur. So these 1 through 11, this basically means that we should prorate them in an annual calculation because they're not giving us the full year's worth of data, and that we should think about how to handle this otherwise. Now the second important thing about this field is there is this reported with December, reported with February. Well, first let's make a flag so we can fill these in as missing instead of NA. I know an RNA means sometimes used as missing data, but here I want to actually make a code that tells me that this data is missing. And then maybe come up later with a label for this type of missingness so that when I'm doing annual roll-ups of this data or I'm doing monthly analysis, I know whether or not this year this entity can be used for that kind of data. So I think that's probably a useful thing that I need to do. I'm just going to make that flag real quick since I've already got all the logic here. Then we'll move on to talking about this reported with month kind of issue. Show me up. Wait, kind of magic where I don't have to put the print. Wow, I actually didn't know that. So my logic is basically going to be first compute the flag for how many months have missing month included in. Then I'm going to for observations where this is greater than 0, is missing, fill it in, code not reported. Okay, so basically that's the logic. Then I can drop the attribute, I think, but come back to that actually. Another kind of missing this where it just says 0 and this flag thing doesn't pop up. I don't really know there. It doesn't say in the documentation of the data whether 0 is missing or 0 is didn't bother to report. But we'll work on that later. Alright, now let's move on to reported with codes, because I think that's going to be pretty important. Oh, the other thing is I should check, is this field covered by code, and in case it means entity reported as a part of another entity. So let's just check one last thing. I can't believe I didn't think of this already. Alright, luckily covered by code is not that common. And I need to handle covered by code later down the road in a different way. So for now, let's just not pay attention to it, but it is important to know that it does occur. I'm really actually kind of curious. What does this look like? Thousand rows. Alright. Didn't report anything. Why do I care? It's true for all of them. Nope. No one reported stuff, even though it is covered by something else. So did this one. Wonder if it was only covered by month. It's like January, February, March, April, May, June, it existed, and then in July it started getting covered by. Same with this one. That's interesting. Alright, we should probably put that in a chunk to document it. So I've already been thinking about, I need to come up with some attributes, and those attributes need to describe the different types of missingness that occurs, and I can do that with, so I'm going to have these kinds where they're just missing one month. I'm going to have kinds where they reported for half the year and then they disappeared, covered up by something else, or went out of existence. That's another type I need to carry through. Kind where they miss the whole year, and the kind where they report annually or biannually, quarterly. And I'll probably need flags for each agency for each year so that I know how to handle each of those cases. And I'll need some sort of functions to clean up the data and interpolate it for different levels of analysis based on those attributes. So I already have discovered one where it's just missing between 1 and 11 months of data, but it has valid data for the whole year. And I've also discovered when there's no data reported at all. And now I've also discovered when it is reported part of the way through the year and then is subsumed into another entity. So those are great, and I'll need flags for all three of those. And I'm going to just go back to the top of my document and write that down so I don't forget. All right. That was good. That was solid work. Can now build those kinds of flags in. And now I want to go back to this issue. Show you. It's a very rare issue. But remember, this is just a sample of my full data, so although it's percentage-wise rare, there could be hundreds of cases that actually have this, where the entity actually honestly says that it reported in October, or in August, it reported its August data with September. And so we know that there's 2 months squished into 1 month. And I think that's going to be something interesting to look at. And take a break on the stream now, give my computer a little bit of a rest, and when I come back in about 10 or 15 minutes, I think we will go ahead and tackle that issue. So, see you then.